It is my distinct pleasure to introduce you to, if you don't know her, LaToya Jordan, Dr. LaToya Jordan. LaToya and I have known one another for almost 10 years now. I was thinking about that earlier today. I thought, man, it doesn't feel like 10 years with LaToya. But she came through an executive program back in 2012, and we quickly started making up opportunities to get to collaborate together and work together. And she was a long-term partner in, for those of you who've been to more recent programs in the D-School, you don't know this, but we used to have organizational sponsors actually sponsor projects. And we did a bunch of fun and exciting and interesting projects with LaToya and the team at JetBlue, where we take folks to the airport at SFO, we get them behind security lines, and we would undertake lots of interesting stuff that then LaToya and her team would take back and try to cook up in the innovation kitchen to apply to the work that they're doing at JetBlue. I won't spoil any of her surprises or any of her stories, but I just wanted to extend a warm D-School welcome to LaToya. And I want to ask you if everyone can join me in giving LaToya some fireworks applause like this. Just a few fireworks applause to welcome LaToya.
So hi, I just was saying that one of the things that endears me to boot camp is the fact that I went through boot camp. That many of you, when you start and you come in on that first day and y'all all like, what the hell did I get myself into? I was right in those same shoes of like, what? For how long? You want me to stay in for how long? Like, I remember just having all of these like feelings about being a part of the D-School experience. And now almost 10 years later, I'm the one that's helping to usher you through those experiences. I think it's a really ironic and pretty cool, quite a full circle for me. So as Jeremy says, for those of you who don't know me, my name is LaToya Jordan, and I was asked to come in and just share my experience of having been a boot camp alum and what that was like to bring it back to work, right? And so I have a pretty, I think, real clear example and to share with you on how that happened for me, and hopefully it'll inspire you to take it home for yourself, even if you're not a designer directly, as I was not. So let me just tell you a little bit about me and why I got to go on this journey with the D-School. So currently I do want to kind of say this as like my caption or like just disclaimer. So I no longer work at JetBlue, but I was there for 8 years. And at the time that I was there, I was asked to take on design thinking and building the capabilities for the company. So that's where I'll be coming to you all from. But I currently am doing something else. I was an executive at the time. And so as HR, but as a part of my HR role, I did a lot of internal consulting for organizations within the company. So that's kind of where the marriage of what I was doing in HR and design thinking kind of came together. Now, some of you may know me as a coach. If you were in 34, which is still very near and dear to my heart, my team is representing here a couple of my folks. So I'm feeling really, really good about the love from version 34 of boot camp. So I do that here with D-School, but I also do it with other organizations. And I love continuing to work in design thinking, although my background was actually not in design. And then all kinds of other fun stuff. I'm a New Yorker, so you'll hear that in my accent and all those kind of fun details. But the reason why I got familiar with D-School was because my organization, for those that don't know, JetBlue had a long-standing relationship with the D-School. One of our executives at the time, Bonnie Simi, was very well connected to D-School and had gone through the program and actually used design thinking in some of the early days of JetBlue's development. And so just as a quick fact sheet about who JetBlue is, for those of you that may not have heard of the airline, particularly if you're international. The company is considered kind of a mid-range player within the airline space domestically, although they do have footprint internationally, but they're pretty well known domestically as this like warm hug kind of airline, right? They were the first airline to put seat backs at every seat. They were the first airline to do kind of like unlimited snacks, things that what they call at the time, like bringing humanity back to air travel. So what better process to use than design thinking or human-centered design in thinking about what the next wave of innovation was, because we, in its inception, was founded on empathy and human connection. So these are just some fun facts about the company. So, but here we were, 2012. I had just joined probably a few months before, and the head of our talent function was that I was again working around being an internal consultant with, said to me, you know, hey, we have some stuff going on in the company. We really want you and a kind of small team to really look at how do we help JetBlue innovate in a few spaces. So here are some of the challenges we're facing. So at the time, the company was really struggling to grow its market share vis-a-vis some of the big players, right? We couldn't figure out at the time in the early 2010 or 11, we were finding more airlines domestically merging, right? And then becoming even bigger powerhouses, which would make us even have an even harder time to build out market or catch up with market share. So we were struggling on that side, but then there were all these small companies like Spirit that were coming in, and they were ultra low carriers. And we were like, well, we don't want to charge $20 for a ticket. So we can't compete at this like Delta, we got all this money space, but we also can't compete with this ultra low cost carrier space. So where do we fit in? How do we build market share? So that was one of the big issues. The other was that as we did our own surveying of our customers, we were finding that most of our customers were one-time customers. They would come in, have the experience, oh, that was cool, and then they would not fly with us again. We were like, but you gave us such high marks, right? Our NPS score was great, you know, all this stuff, but we couldn't convert to loyal customers. And the company wanted to figure out what was going on there. And then lastly, and you all know this probably pre-pandemic, right? Air travel was no longer this like luxury cool experience. It was like a commodity, like you have to fly to get to point A to B. It wasn't really a thing of, you know, this being this exciting experience anymore. It was just a means to an end. And with that, then cost and efficiency became more of the driving purchasing decision than other kind of key touch points, or like free snacks no longer matter because you just needed to get to St. Louis by 2, right? So you didn't care if you got popcorners or not, you just needed to get there. And so does it have the schedule and the price that I need, period. And so those things, these 3 things began to really erode the things that as a company we stood up and were founded on, right? We were founded on being a differentiator, a disruptor in the airline industry. But now, when I was being tasked with this project, those issues were starting to erode. So we had that. And then we had this other thing, right? We would go into an airport any given day at a peak time. And this is what we would see. I mean, folks packed everywhere. I mean, you can't move around. Sometimes we would bring like important figures through our airports, and they would see this and they would be aghast, right? And we would be embarrassed. We are bringing humanity back to the air travel, but we got folks experiencing this. And so my leadership was like, we got to do something. This is not our brand. We do not want to be linked to other air experiences. So you got to help us innovate and come out of this. So what they did was they said, LaToya, we've been partnering with d.school. We gave them this topic. They've been collecting some data for us, but now we want to send you out there. We want you to get steeped in it real quick so that you can do something and help us. So go. So in March of 2012, I went and had the deer in the headlights look that many of you had. If you have experienced d.school when we were still in person, you remember some of those pictures on the left side, right? Standing on the top of the stairs, looking down at Jeremy and Perry and Catherine do their thing, right? Like that was the experience that I did in 2012. And then was being expected to come back to the organization with a plan. So to Jeremy's point, I want to just pause here, given everything I done told you so far about what JetBlue was experiencing, what they were kind of starting to freak out about. What would you do if you were JetBlue and you were in their shoes? And what on earth would you do if you were in my shoes? I am not a designer. I can't draw worth a damn. I am this internal consultant that is being expected to fix a whole airline's problem through this thing I just learned in March, right? What would you do to help to solve this gnarly, hairy challenge for an airline of this size? So what I did was I came back after the experience, and I put together a team, a very small team, and we went off to do a 3-month, what we call design thinking project that it internally was called Airports of the Future. But for our purposes, like just reimagining the ground experience. And so I had to present this to our C-suite that here's the goal of the 3-month project. It was to really identify refresh offerings of that ground experience. So we were trying to start at that point of the travel ribbon. The reason for that was we at the time, my team, we were based in New York, and our at our signature or main airport, which is JFK. And while there are other parts, particularly our customer support, if you were to call or make your reservation, you were based in Salt Lake, we decided to focus on what we could physically access. So we started with the ground experience, particularly at JFK, because that's where many connections and all of those types of things would happen. So we decided that we wanted to look at that. And we had identified 3 strategic areas to focus on: the customer's experience itself, the process by which they went through. So to some of your point, what is that travel ribbon like? Are there pain points within that travel ribbon that we can play with? And then what are the roles that they interact with while they're going through the travel ribbon? So those were the 3 areas we decided to focus on. So here's just some quick facts about that 3-month project. We did 10 day-long sessions. So think of 10 boot camps, but 1 day each, right? And I literally took them through empathy to test in a day, right? We went to, and then we had like, if you think of like your final synthesis, after collecting all of that data, we did like big POV statements at the end of these events. We went to these airports, and we, as well as we went to our, what we consider our headquarters or our support center, which is in Long Island City. So LSC was our headquarters, and we interviewed people in our systems operations group and other areas that were specifically tied to the ground experience, but were based in our headquarters. And then we went to these different airports. And we did it from June to August, which was very interesting because that is peak for us. So we were going at one of the busiest times of travel for our airline. We also, when it was done, you'll see a note here at the bottom that we also then did a collaboration experience with Fidelity. They were a business partner of ours from a financial perspective. And they also were friends from the D.school. I knew a coach there. And so we decided, why not bring her folks to talk about a fresh pair of eyes? They were business travelers. So why not have one session that was strictly for Fidelity folks to experience and help us to think about these topics directly. So we did that a year later to kind of test some of the things that we had heard and to get a fresh pair of eyes. But so that's what we did. And here, literally, it looked like what y'all can imagine, right? Like we were all up in these airports, y'all. On the left, you see these 2 gentlemen. This was because I had someone out there, and he interacted with this customer who was like, I'm trying to catch a flight. He's like, oh, it's okay, I'll walk with you. I'll walk and we can have this interview as you walk. Like we were accosting people, for, if I'm honest. But the intention was to try to talk to people at different points during the travel experience. So this one on the right, they were literally about to get their boarding pass and their ticket here on the right. Again, I told you about this guy. This woman here was just getting into the airport. And we were like, we want to know about that. So we were trying to be very strategic about touching at different points of the travel ribbon. We talked to an actual JetBlue employee. So that's this gentleman here. We talked to TSA. And when you work for an airline, I got to tell you, you don't really want to talk to TSA. You're angry at them because you feel like you like to blame a lot of stuff on them. They become your scapegoat. And so, but we were like, but we want to know their experience too. One of the most interesting things that this woman shared with us, and I went back and looked at my notes. She was like, you know what I am? I'm tired of being your wayfinder. I'm tired of y'all not having enough signs that I can't do my job because I'm trying to tell people where the bathroom is or where gate 22 is. How about y'all work on that? And it was just like, well, first of all, you ain't got to be so raw with it. But second of all, thank you for let me get some empathy for your experience. And that is probably a good point. Wayfinders, to help people usher through that experience, can help to reduce some of their anxiety so that they're not having to ask TSA where certain things are. So that was really interesting. And then we talked to people who were just sitting for a long time waiting for their flight. They had a really long layover. And this was a couple here on the bottom right that we interviewed in one of our food areas. So really interesting way that we kind of gather. And again, we went to so many airports and did this. And then we did what y'all know we would do, right? We took that insight, we built out POVs. You see that here in the bottom right. They were building out, like they were debriefing what they heard and then moving posters around. We created some crazy behind, prototypes. And then we went right back into the airport. And this is the part that was hilarious. Someone said, like, have people from different, parts of the company working together. Listen, we had mechanics in here doing this. We had in-flight crew members, we had pilots, we had HR folks, we had people from every part of the business doing this. And while they were sometimes embarrassed, they felt that they gained better insight to what their work was by being in this experience and talking directly to the customer. One great example was we were talking to someone and the maintenance guy was like, oh, we don't need all these different colored lights. Like, you guys are being ridiculous about brand and everything doesn't have to be blue, right? And he was really complaining from an inventory perspective. But when we talked to a customer, they talked about kind of how the brand experience helped them to feel really calm. They loved the aesthetic for JetBlue, and it helped them to feel connected with our company because of what it did for them. And he was like, oh, okay, then let me make more space for the blue light. I'm like, see, like, calm down. So some of it also was, I think leaders are really happy that I was able to bring some of that to the space. So here were our findings, y'all. We found 3 things from this 3-month project. And let me just keep saying, like, that was just a 3-month project. They did way more after we were done. But 3 things: the human touch was paramount. That everyone we talked to, they were like, we need to see a human, like the signs, like we really just want to talk to someone. Technology is great because, we were all like, oh, let's create an app, let's create this. And they were like, that's an enabler, but it would really be helpful if it was tethered to a human, right? And so they just really wanted more connection with people. And then the last thing, it was like we knew, but we really didn't get the weight of it. The unpredictability and uncertainty that comes with travel, particularly air travel, delays and missed flights and all that, creates such anxiety that we have to do whatever we can to bring that down, right? So we created this POV around kind of aligning to our original commitment, which was inspire humanity. And so we needed to do something to bring that back. So phase 1 of the project included 3 things. Remember, I said something about role was an important piece of our thing. So what we realized was that we needed to update the job description of those that worked in the airline or in the ground experience, because we realized that the job description was very technical, but we needed people who had more human-centeredness to them. So we changed the language of the job description. And then we did 2 beta tests. You'll see this one on the bottom left. We created this coat check because we heard people saying they just need to like unload and like not have someone. It created anxiety to be carrying a coat, but you're going to Cancun and you're like carrying that with your bags and you're trying to get something to eat. So we thought, oh, why don't we let's test this? Would that help to bring out, to reduce some of the anxiety people were experiencing? So here is an example of one of the things. This is literally language from the job description that was changed. So what you'll see here is our friendly and helpful AO crew members welcome customers with a smile and help manage a smooth check-in and boarding process. To be successful in this role, you'll need to have a helpful attitude, solid computer skills, and a commitment to serving with excellence in all situations. The team spent a lot of time in ordering that language, right? Helpful attitude comes before solid computer skills on purpose, right? Because what we learned is that the human touch was important. So we needed to hire people who would meet that, right? Like we totally had missed the importance of those AO or airport operation crew members and the type of talent we needed to hire for that role. So that was a really, really cool insight that we ended up actioning. So that worked. The beta test for the auto check-in worked. We just needed to evolve it. We realized that we did a cool beta test and we saw some wins, but we now needed to partner with a company to actually bring a real auto or self check-in process to life. We learned that the code check thing really didn't do much. It didn't like take away as much anxiety as we hoped. So we did not move forward with that project. And we added 2 more things in phase 2. One was around redesigning the footprint of the front of JFK and also reassigning our crew members to different tasks. So that was the outcome. And when I left the project to move on, this is what the team kind of moved forward with to test. So I just want to share with you quickly what some of those outcomes were. So on the left is what you normally saw in an airport. And on the right was the redesign of the JFK footprint at the front. It was way cleaner. We've removed all the stanchions in the front of the airport and allow people to move through it. We kept hearing people say, when we asked them, tell us about an experience that when you walk into it, you feel, great or whatever. And we kept hearing things like the Apple Store or things like that. And we were like, okay, how do we make this experience feel like an Apple Store? So what we did was everything in the front is self-serve. And in the back is the Genius Bar. In the back is, oh my God, I'm about to miss my flight, help me kind of support. But in the front, you'll just see kind of open space for you to move around, get your boarding passes, get your own bags. You can drop your own bags. You don't need to talk to anyone unless you want to, right? And here are the people that if you want to talk to them, we reassign them. So instead of having a lot of people who worked the ticket counter, we now made them roaming people like you see in the Apple Store. And instead of them staying in the counter, we now created the counter is the Genius Bar. So only when the Dominican Republic flight is about to leave in less than 30 minutes, now we make that like a triage area versus you got to just go in there to get a ticket for DR, but you got a whole hour and a half to wait. No, go and self-check in, and that lovely lady who was there right here can help you check in. But if there's an emergency or something that you need that support on, that's when you use our desk. We also even tried a new thing, and this was totally past me, but this was from the insights they got from the project, was they was like, well, now if you can get your own tags and your own boarding pass, what if you can board without a person too? Like, what if we made this the whole experience? And so we did and it's currently in production, biometric self-boarding, where you just can look at something and walk right on through to your plane. I will say though, this is one of the things that is still very controversial. People feel very like awkward about what this is. So we've gotten both good and bad press about that. Other things that came out of the insight we gained, you normally see when we were walking around doing observations, people were sleeping everywhere. They had long layovers. So we partnered with the company that allowed us to create these sleeping pods to help people who have layovers take a nap. We also learned that our customers were really young. Our loyal customers tend to have a younger kind of age range because they grew up with us, because we had the planes that had the televisions. So their parents always wanted to fly us and they wanted to fly us. So those folks really cared about the environment and they wanted to see a company that cared about the environment as well. So we created on our rooftop a farm that grew the potatoes that were then placed into our terra chips. So blue potatoes were grown on the farm upstairs. Another part of the project was we wanted to talk to moms and figure out, what do you need? Like, you seem to be an extreme user, right? You're carrying and you got all this stuff going on. So we learned a lot from our parents. One thing that we then tested, and is still in the airports, even internationally, are lactation rooms for women to go and pump. And then on the left was a really, really cool campaign that we did on Mother's Day that allowed, we switched it, kind of like what I heard someone say on the chat. We turned crying babies on its head. And what we said on Mother's Day was, for every crying baby, you get 25% off your next flight. So if 4 babies cry, you get a free flight if you're on this plane. And it was like a big thing, it was a huge media win. And that was some came out of the fact that we heard moms talk about how stressed they were that their kid was going to cry when they got on a plane, or all the eye rolls they got when someone would see that they're sitting next to someone with a kid. So that was some of the empathy work and how we actioned that work. We also kind of got a little of this from Doug Deeks, if you've ever seen his talk around the adventure series. Kids get bored at airports. And so we try to create spaces where it could be more of an adventure. And it came from those conversations with parents to understand what their needs were. And then the last thing that came out of this particular project was they asked me to take design thinking and use it to help them to assess the designs that they were creating for the new planes that we were about to roll out, which was our A321. And so we were about to go into a first class experience. And while I was not, again, I told y'all I can't draw, they had a design firm do it because you have airline design firms, but they wanted us to take design thinking to assess, does the changes we're going to make in this design meet our customers' need? Does it align to empathy? So we did a lot of work for this project to know what really mattered to our customers from an empathy perspective. And then I moved on and did some other work for the company, but then a whole team was stood up called Design Doing that still exists for JetBlue now. And they continued that work. And someone said, like, do it earlier in the travel ribbon. They have done some really, really cool work on reconfiguring the aircraft. They actually, that project, they used design thinking and did similar boot camps to help convince the company to have less. Now, this was deep. They got the company to agree to having less seats on the aircraft because of the empathy that they had gotten from the in-flight crew, and how that configuration of more seats would cram up the galley area where the in-flight crew worked. And so it was through that experience that they were able to make our, it's kind of like our version of a union called the Values Committee. The Values Committee was able to create a presentation through storytelling to get the company to agree to put less seats in that newly configured plane. So it was really, really proud work for them. And then they also did some work you'll see with the heads in cardboard. They were testing this idea of having a chat feature in the conversations with customers versus being on the phone. So how can they use chat features, texting, et cetera, to interact with our customers versus always being tethered to a phone, because that costs money for the company. So those were some of the experiences that we did post my time with the group. And then the last thing, Jeremy, I know you're going to jump in, was we switched from from trays to carts. And the Design Doing team was able to, again, leverage the in-flight crew to have this experience to decide that carts was the best choice for the company. So
that's great.
That's how we used it throughout the company so far.
Can we give LaToya another round of fireworks applause? If everybody wouldn't mind, just fireworks applause. Yeah, thank you, LaToya. We want to there's some amazing questions in the chat, so we want to call a few of them out. But sure. I just want to call out the fact that you said the work that the team did after you departed, but you really laid the foundations for the work and you set the team up for success. So I think you still get to claim credit even for the stuff that they did after you left, because of the impact that you had and the way that you equipped many of your colleagues to use these tools. We've got several questions. I think a couple of members of the teaching team will dive into the chat and ask a couple. I just wanted to mention, we want to do this about once a month. We're actually going to have an alumni talk. If you have an idea for an amazing alum who you'd like to nominate to give us a talk, or if you have some amazing stories that you'd like to share with a broader audience, please reach out to us, to the teaching team, and let us know. Myself, Perry, Catherine, Zhao, we'd love to spotlight you, as we've done with LaToya today. And the other thing is we'd like to also share some of our research and thought leadership and various things. And so once a month, our team is going to host some kind of a talk. And we have a talk coming up in just 2 weeks around the discipline of seeking fresh input to drive your creative output. So I'm going to drop a link in the chat. If you want to look at that, you're welcome to do so. So with that, I'll hand it over to Catherine to highlight the first question that we'd like to have LaToya answer.
Okay, so many great questions and really comments coming in, honestly. So much fun and delight in the presentation and of course the experience for customers. I'll start with one question that Sebastian asked, which I think is great and maybe you can talk to a little bit more broadly. He was asking it about one specific concept, but he said, could you tell us a little bit about your ROI or your customer satisfaction scores, or just how do you start to measure something so rough? That could be on a specific concept, if you want to give an example of that, or a little bit more broadly too.
Yeah, so that's yes, definitely something I'd want to make sure I share. So with the early concepts that I was more in charge of, for us, it was around we did do some surveying, and we always use NPS. And so we did find that particularly within JFK, which is where we were testing most of these ideas, we did find NPS to increase. The thing for me, and maybe this is like my whole like PhD thing, I felt like it's hard to isolate that, because at the time we were also introducing other programs, right? Like in 2014, like late 2013, we also was introducing a new loyalty program. We were also about to roll out a whole new first class. So while I'd love to say that I was the reason why NPS was increased, the scientist in me said I can't isolate the variable to know that that one thing, like self bag check and things like that, was the whole thing. I will say though, now that said, because I felt the need to have a disclaimer, is the uptake of the self check-in monster at JFK. You rarely are able to go in and see the clutter and the lines and things like that you used to see, even at peak. So we saw that more as a win of like, yes, that worked. People are taking that up and they appreciate it. But from an ROI or exact pound for pound, I personally am not comfortable going there.
Okay, thanks for sharing a little bit.
Catherine, I think you saw one more question you wanted to
Yeah.
highlight.
Oh, I'm all deep in the chat. Okay, so Catherine from Boston Children's Hospital has a question that I think is cool and maybe resonates with people across different industries. So she's coming from a healthcare and like ICU background. For you, she says, what was the approach for your interviews with travelers who were stressed and perhaps rushed? Did you have a certain approach, or how do you get to engage with customers that don't really aren't likely to have the opportunity to spend extra time with you, right? Like I imagine she has this experience a lot, and maybe many of you do too, in the customers you're trying to engage with. Do you have any tips or thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, we really took the approach of being extremely empathetic and extremely like, hey, if you know, do you have time? Would you mind? We were very thoughtful and I don't want to say soft, but we really did go in with an empathetic approach. And with that, we also did give people an out, right? If we were talking to someone who was having like a kid have a total meltdown, we would do one of two things. One, be like, is there something we can do to help? Right? Because we normally would go in pairs. So, hey, can my friend do a puppet show while I talk to you or whatever? So I remember like there'd be one of us on the floor playing with the kid while we talked to the parent. But if there was a moment where they were just kind of like, no, I really can't, particularly because we are in New York and folks are very comfortable saying no, we were like, that's totally fine. Thank you. Because we didn't offer any type of incentive for doing it. So it literally was, if you weren't comfortable, then we moved on and found someone else, and that was okay. No judgment.
Thanks for sharing. It's fun too. I think airlines are the Disneyland of empathy work. They're just so they're emotional hotbeds, of course.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, LaToya.
I was going to say, I mean, I think just Catherine, because I know where your work. I think knowing that you just have so many people to talk to, that it kind of frees you from feeling like you need to talk to that one person, right? There are tons in that space. So if they say no, it's okay. Just go to the next person and don't waste time trying to convince someone. I think that would be my advice for sure.
Thanks. Okay, we have one question to end on. It's a little more personal, so feel free to like share or not share, whatever you want to.
Don't cry. Don't cry.
Oh. Or we'll get you a cocktail, or no, what do? We'll give you miles. Okay. Humera asked, my question is personal, so totally okay if you don't want to go there, but with design thinking on the rise, why did you leave JetBlue? Did your exposure from design thinking personally transform you, or what were you hungry for in your next chapter?
Wow, that's a beautiful. Okay, yeah, happy to share. So
Right.
as I mentioned, I eventually moved on from the work even internally for JetBlue, Humira. So there is a beautiful, amazing team that took that work over. And while I supported them whenever they needed it, I certainly had already moved on from doing that work day to day. And honestly, the reason why I left JetBlue was to do more human-centered work on my own, right? Sometimes when you become like an executive, you stop getting a chance to be human-centered, right? And so having the chance to go out and do my own thing and create the type of work that I want to do from a leadership development perspective gave me the air that I was looking for. So it now is a yes and, right? I get to do coaching and design thinking work in my own practice that was a little bit hampered because of the amount of responsibilities I had as an executive at that point.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, Josh, I see Josh snapping like, yeah, right. You guys get that sometimes. You get too far up where they're like, humans, what humans? We got metrics to hit, lady. So, I had to move on from that.